So here we are. It's about 5 miles from the Penn State Abington campus. We're inside Philadelphia, the city where Kane was born, into this prominent family. His father was a prominent judge, had once been Attorney General of Pennsylvania. His mother was a socialite, very wealthy family, well connected, and of course, as the first son in this big prominent family, the expectations were high for Elijah. He was expected to go farther, do more than anybody before him. So, at the same time, he had all sorts of health problems. He was always sickly as a child. He had continuous cases of rheumatic fever. They weakened his heart, so much so that he was considered unfit by his father to succeed. He could never live up to those expectations. He goes off to college at the University of Pennsylvania, gets a medical degree, and his old man pulls some strings for him. Gets him a commission in the Navy as a surgeon. Goes down to the Philadelphia Navy Yard. The father thinks, great. He's there at the Navy Yard, nice, safe, and secure, probably has an office job. What happens then? Elijah says, no way with this business. I am going for it. I'm going to show the old man that I've got what it takes to be a member of the Kane family. And so what does he do? He gets himself on an expedition to China. And from there, he has adventures all over the world. He goes to the Philippines, where he climbs. He's lowered over the precipice of a volcano on a bamboo rope. He collects every disease you could imagine. He gets tick fever in Macau. He gets coast fever in Africa. He visits the Peloponnese in Greece. He visits the pass at Thermopylae. He goes to Africa. He comes back. He's had these incredible experiences. It's not good enough. So next, what does he do? He decides to ask the President of the United States for a commission to take messages to a general in the Mexican War. And he gets the commission. He goes there as a messenger. And in the middle of carrying a message, he finds himself in command of a troop of men who are pinned down by a bunch of guerrillas. He gets a sword run through him, right through his belly, and he survives. Comes back to Philadelphia. He's a big hero. It's still not good enough. In 1845, the British had sent an expedition to try to find the Northwest Passage under John Franklin. It turns into a disaster. Franklin and 128 men are lost in the Arctic. It's the biggest event of its day. Nations, Britain, the United States, start to send expeditions out to look for Franklin. Any trace they can get of this guy and his 2 ships. Kane goes along on an expedition organized and financed by a guy named Grinnell from New York. Big, rich shipping magnate. He goes as a surgeon. He's this sickly, weakly 29-year-old. And he gets up to the Arctic for the first time, and it's a revelation. And unlike these previous British accounts of Arctic exploration, where people would drudge and carry sledges for thousands of miles with a very little emotion, this American, Elisha Kent Kane, starts to write about the Arctic as this romantic place of heroism. Icebergs are like God's cathedrals. He starts to see mirages in the sky that look like pianos, and they change into balloons and into bowling balls. Everything is magical to him. Nobody had written about the Arctic like this before. We're just 10 miles from campus. We've come across Philadelphia, and we're only about 100 yards from the entrance to the Laurel Hill Cemetery, one of the first rural cemeteries in the United States. Look at it now. It's surrounded by city. The city of Philadelphia has grown out into this area, swallowed up this cemetery. But in the 19th century, this was the boondocks, and anybody who was anybody in Philadelphia society wanted to be buried here at Laurel Hill. First cemetery in the United States to be a National Historic Landmark. A necropolis, a true city of the dead. Here we are, Laurel Hill Cemetery. Anybody who is anybody in Philadelphia, look at this place. Time and grass. A life devoted to good works. And Hugh Mercer, hero of the Battle of Princeton, 1777, fought alongside George Washington, buried right here. Here it is, the Crypt of Elisha Kent Kane, and look at where it is. It's outside the cemetery, in one of the most prominent places in Philadelphia. Thousands of cars go by it every day, but nobody knows that that is Elisha Kent Kane, the most famous American Arctic explorer, perhaps, of the 19th century. And yet there he sits, buried in the side of a mountain, like some Egyptian pharaoh. It's outside a fence now, so we're going to have to jump the fence and get over to see him. How are we remembered in death? Well, Kane went to the Arctic twice. He became the most famous explorer of his day. He set a romantic model that even Robert Peary and the great Norwegian Roald Amundsen would follow in the 20th century. But here he lies anonymously, and yet in one of the most prominent grave sites in Philadelphia. It's one of the ironies that he was famous in life, forgotten now, even though he's in this prominent gravestone. A commentary on how we hold our explorers in esteem. Who survives? Who remains famous? Who becomes forgotten? Kane, famous in his day, the romantic hero, forgotten now in death, entombed here along the Schuylkill River, just 10 miles from Penn State, Abington. Extraordinary.